And to talk about the refugee asylum seeker crisis, as they say, inside Europe, I'm joined here, first of all, in the Beijing studio by Professor Wang Yiwei. He is a professor and also director of the Center of EU Studies at China's Renmin University. Welcome, Professor. Meanwhile, in Paris, France, we are joined by Mr. Joab Toker, professor at the American Graduate School in Paris. And in Athens, Greece, we have Dr. George Zokopoulos, research fellow at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Studies. Welcome, gentlemen, to our discussion. This is a mounting task facing the European continent, the crisis, some even use the word. But may I ask you, Mr. Zokopoulos, you are coming from Greece. How many are there, these refugees and asylum seekers coming from other countries now in your country? What do you think, as one of the very few countries many of these asylum seekers first arrived on the European continent, should be the solution?
Thank you for this invitation. Greece indeed now faces a very important problem with the refugees coming mainly from Syria and also other countries of the Middle East, such as Afghanistan. The Greek government right now is suffering by the economic crisis, so it does not have the means to deal with the problem. And what is happening is that there are some boats which transfer the immigrants, the refugees from the islands of Greece, which are near Turkey, to Athens. And then these refugees are trying to go to the northern European countries, because Greece is a transit country. So the refugees who are coming here do not want to stay in Greece, especially now because of the crisis. They want to leave from the country and go mainly to Germany and Sweden.
I see. Professor Toker, you are now in France. France is not usually the first country that these asylum seekers or migrants landed on into the European countries. And according to the Dublin regulation, these asylum seekers usually can seek their status in the first European country that they landed. So, do you think France is feeling much less pressure, let's just say, compared to your counterpart today in Greece?
Yes, France is under pressure, but on a completely different level, which changes the political game in view of French political hierarchy, because France, as you very correctly mentioned, is not a territory of physical migrant pressure. And if it is so, I have in mind, of course, mainly what is happening in northern France, next to Calais and next to the British-French tunnel, and we saw some violent incidents over there last month and for years now, and that seems to have calmed down relatively. But it's true enough, this year France is not a major destination in terms of countries the migrants wish to go. But last year, for example, France was number one amongst all European nations to accord asylum seekers permits. Was number one in the European list, and would probably take about 70,000 this year.
Mr. Zokopoulos, since you're in Greece, do you think what, for example, the French foreign minister's attitude is correct? May I read his quote? He said, these people, mainly the migrants and also the asylum seekers, they're coming to our continent, and we should be able, quote, we should be able to welcome them. And obviously, France is not the first country to welcome them, but rather your country, Italy, Hungary, and some of the other Balkans. Is it fair for your country?
Well, it is a very good question, but the distance between theory and practice is very long. So practically what we need is the European Union to accept more refugees or asylum seekers, and this is what's not happening right now. And news we have, especially in July, suggests that still there is the European Union is not able to find a common position on the matter. I'm not optimistic also for the European summit, which will take place in the next days, because it seems that apart from Germany and Sweden, the other European countries are not prepared to share the burden. Greece is not alone, of course. Italy faces the same problems, and both the countries try to put pressure on the European Union to cooperate, but it seems to me that's very late right now.
Professor Wang, you've been patiently listening in the Beijing studio. Of course, from an observer's perspective, everything could be easy if we are talking about solution, but certainly you are an expert on the European continent. Should countries like Greece, Italy, and also Hungary establish so-called welcome centers to provide the food, communication, all of these to the already exceedingly large number they have to receive, first of all. Secondly, do you see a fair discussion about the migrants issue now inside the European Union between so-called the rich and the poor?
Well, firstly, I feel very sympathy to Italy, Greece, and other countries who suffer from the crisis, migrants and refugees. You know, they suffer the debt crisis and then another crisis, so it's difficult to handle. I think this is about the responsibility of the whole European Union because of the freedom of the migrants, the people enter one border and then to pass to other countries. As the Greek counterpart said, that it's easy to flow to the north of the Europe, the rich, easy to get a job. However, according to the Dublin regulation, the first enter country should take the responsibility. You cannot send back if there's refugees. So this is a challenge, firstly, to European Union's values about the equality, fairness, and liberty. Now they suffer of these values. Secondly, it's also about always speaking one voice. There's no single border policy of the European Union. Those countries who should take the responsibility. So this is unfair for the poor and the rich, particularly. And also, I think it's also challenging for European Union's neighborhood policy. Take for example, the Syria crisis. For a long time, the European Union and the United States jointly want to remove Saddam Assad's regime.
Right.
So the civil wars continued for several years. That's the millions of the refugees pulling down into European Union. This
Professor Wang, you've been talking about some of the biggest controversies I think the EU this time has to face. As a result, Professor Toker, what do you think should be the result? Of course, the consultations are still going on, even though there is already a very long summer. Nothing has been done yet. But what do you think can be the right solution? Is there, Professor Toker, going to be a quote-unquote fair share of responsibility in terms of these migrant and asylum seeker crisis?
Well, I have in mind what could be or what could contribute to the right solution or to a better solution or to a positive solution, but I'm sure once I'm going to pronounce it in 10 seconds, my colleagues in Athens and Beijing and so many others would say that's naive, that's unrealistic. I think that the European Union, accounting 510 million inhabitants, it's the third political entity on earth, well beyond China and India, can take 500,000 immigrants per year, can even take 1 million immigrants per year, keeping in mind that those immigrants are not just numbered in terms of quantity, excuse me the term, but also in terms of ambition, in terms of their way of just trying to climb up social mobility ladders as they come from crisis and tragedy countries. So it is the interest of most European Union countries to take those migrants.
Okay.
Now, I can say that in
Professor
the comfort
Toker,
of a TV studio.
Professor Toker, we're going to explore some of the points you just talked about, but first of all, let's talk about the numbers. You talk about numbers of what 510 million, that's the population of European continent, and you say that could be exactly enlarged by migrants. Let's take a look at some of the other countries and continents have been doing. How many refugees, people would ask, can the EU nations take in? Take a look at some of these figures. Lebanon, for example, this is a relatively small country currently hosting 1.2 million Syrian asylum seekers. Of course, Lebanon has been heavily burdened as it has only a population of roughly 4.5 million. Contrast that to the numbers arriving in Europe so far this year, 200,000. Professor Toker, is that the point you're trying to make?
No, the point I'm trying to make is the one I can make in the comfort of a TV studio and a TV debate, and most probably I won't be able to take if I were a political leader or a minister or a leader of a political party.
But I thought
electorally and politically
But I thought
difficult
being
to
pragmatic
pronounce, but
is also the ethics of a scholar, in a way.
Indeed, you are. Indeed, you are right. These are the ethics of the way scholars may look. But I think also that politically, demographically, economically, on the long run, these are good reasons to promote this kind of voluntary immigration, rather than just trying to find all kind of last-minute solutions on the short run, like the one which probably the ministers, the interior ministers of the union would try to find 14 days from today.
We heard your points. Mr. Zokopoulos in Greece, do you think what Professor Toker has been talking pragmatically is that your country can accept, with already the big foundation of many migrants and asylum seekers coming in already at this point, to accept more? And obviously, Professor Toker is not talking anything specific about what France can do, specifically the country that he is from at this moment.
Well, Greece and Italy are the countries which suffer more, because they are the countries which are welcoming the refugees and asylum seekers right now. The thing is that these countries need more money and need more help from the European Union, and this has to do, for example, with more rescue operations to avoid having more victims. We should start from that. Every day we hear in the news that so many immigrants and refugees are become dead because they cannot arrive to Greece and Italy safely. So the European Union should respect its values and help in that regard.
Right.
But apart from that, the European Union should also pay attention and efficiently deal with human traffickers, which are the main cause of the problem, because these traffickers are the ones which are bringing the refugees to Greece and Italy, and the attention should be paid towards that direction.
Money, manpower, energy, time, all of this are supposed to be called the resources. Who is going to devote that type of resource for handling all of these questions, Mr. Zokopoulos, you just mentioned? I want to ask this question to Professor Toker. Who is going to be responsible for sharing these responsibilities? And where would the resources come from? Will that come from Greece, Italy, and Hungary, or rather coming from richer countries like France, the UK, and Germany, and some of the others? Is your country willing to do anything, do you think?
Well, of course, this is the common sense solution. Of course, Greece does not have to pay for its proportional share of refugees knocking at the doors of its shores, or any other country. It should be, and this is actually where we should head at, naming the heart of the problem, the core of the problem. The core of the problem is an absence of foreign policy, which is common to the European Union. Now, we are aware of this problem over other crisis situations, such as the Middle East and Africa and Ukraine, even Ukraine on European soil. But this time, European nations do not deal with a crisis about which they do not have a common policy, which happens far away and on the other side of the waters, but it happens at home.
If we know what the problem is, do we know the solutions? Who are likely to work on the solutions? Professor Wang, should, would, could, these are all things easier to say, but who is going to do that exactly? When is that likely to be done? Is the question the international community has been watching.
Well, the colleagues, there's a technician debate about the crisis. I think the long-term strategically, this is about the gap between European Union and its neighbor. So European Union not just focus on its own governance, good governance. It should also for the good governance of your neighborhood. Otherwise, these challenges will continue and continue. So reach of the Chinese goal, I think there is a saying that the community of common destiny. This is the final solution of the crisis.
But of course, China and others are also working for that, not necessarily solving the problems, even though we have a slogan like that also. Heard what Professor Wang just said, Mr. Zokopoulos, some easy words coming from you, or rather simple words. What do you think can be solution? In 2 weeks' time, can the ministers solve the problem? Where can they start with?
Well, they should practically agree and then implement the policies. We have heard so many proposals in the past, but the problem is the lack of unity in the European Union. I think the problem started many years ago with the wars in the Middle East, and now the European Union, along with the United States, of course, are paying a very heavy price for that kind of policies. Greece and Italy had paid first the price, and now it is the whole European Union that has to participate. Germany has showed the way, and I think that other powerful and economically stable European countries should also follow the paradigm of Germany. Right. And the European Union at the same time should also put some pressure on Turkey to cooperate in a more efficient way with Frontex in the Greek boundaries.
Okay. Professor Toker, also in a few words, if you can, really, gentlemen, help us to understand what can be the solution in the immediate term, and whether the ministers on the 14th of September likely to do anything.
I'm afraid on September 14th they won't be able to move things in a radical way. I think that they will be technicians on September 14th and would probably produce some efficient, I hope, and humanitarian and easing measures. But what should follow is not the work of technicians, it's the work of politicians and designers, long-term designers, and these are not the ministers of interior which are going to meet in Luxembourg on September 14th.
Obviously, the issue has already become very political, but it seems being political is not necessarily going to really bring us the political solutions. What can we say? We'll have to wait. Thank you so much, gentlemen, though, for your input. Professor Wang Yiwei here with us in Beijing. In Paris, Professor Joab Toker, and also in Athens, Greece, Dr. George Zoukopoulos. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. All the best, of course. Thank you.